She tried to fine me thousands of dollars and threatened to have my dock removed by force. But when I pulled out the real property records, I found something that made her entire case collapse. The HOA officer who accused me did not even own a single inch of the lake she claimed was hers. That is how this all started, with one angry HOA officer named Karen and a dock she said was sitting on community property. But the truth? The truth was sitting right under her nose the entire time. Let me rewind to how it all began. When I first moved into Willow Ridge Estates 3 years ago, I thought I had found a peaceful corner of heaven. A quiet lakeside neighborhood, trimmed lawns, families walking dogs in the evenings, and that steady sound of water lapping at the docks. It felt like home right away. My house sat right on the edge of Willow Ridge Reservoir, and tucked behind it was a small wooden dock that came with the property. It was old but sturdy, perfect for my weekend fishing or launching my kayak. No one ever complained, until Karen showed up. Now every neighborhood has one person who takes the HOA job way too seriously. Ours was Karen, the vice president of the HOA, a woman in her 50s with a pink suit for every meeting and a voice that could slice through drywall. She had been here for barely 6 months before she started cracking down on violations, mailbox colors, trash bins left out too long, lawns that grew half an inch too high. She walked around the block with a clipboard like she was inspecting military housing. At first, I thought it was kind of funny. She once told my next-door neighbor, "Your mailbox is a shade too beige." That became a running joke between us. Better not upset the beige police. But it stopped being funny when I became her next target. It started with a knock on my door one Thursday morning. I opened it to find Karen standing there with her HOA badge clipped to her blazer, a folder in her hand, and a tight smile. She said, "You are aware that your dock extends into HOA-managed water, correct?" I said, "I am not sure what you mean. The dock came with the house." She replied, "That may be, but it violates Section 8.4 of the community bylaws. Any structure on shared property must be approved by the board. You will need to remove it or face daily fines." Then she handed me a notice, $250 a day until I complied. I remember standing there speechless, holding the paper as she walked away like she had just delivered a court verdict. That night, I pulled out the property file from my closing documents, the kind of paperwork you sign 100 times without ever reading line by line. I spread it out across my kitchen table and traced the boundary lines with my finger. And there it was, in black and white. Property extends into the reservoir, approximately 150 feet from shoreline. That meant the lakefront, and the water touching my dock, was mine. So how could she claim it was HOA property? The next morning, I called the HOA office. Brad, the manager, sounded hesitant when I explained the situation. He said, "Look, man, this whole lake thing has always been messy. Some of the lots have rights to the water, some do not. I can check the files, but honestly, if it is on your deed, that is usually the final word." I emailed him a scan of the deed that same afternoon. He replied, "Yep, that looks legit. You are good." Problem solved, right? Wrong. 2 days later, I came home to see Karen standing at the end of my driveway again, this time snapping pictures of my dock like she was collecting evidence for a trial. I walked over calmly and asked, "Is there something wrong?" She said, "Yes, you are still violating HOA boundaries. The board will be discussing penalties next week." I told her, "Brad already confirmed the dock is within my property line." Her expression barely changed. "Well, I spoke to the county office myself. The reservoir belongs to the community." Now that got my attention. I had lived in this state long enough to know how property rights work. Lakes and reservoirs can be privately owned, but only if the deed says so. So either she was bluffing, or she had found something I had missed. That night, I drove to the county records office. The clerk was kind enough to pull up the historic plat maps. And there it was again, the same boundary, the same note. Private reservoir ownership subdivided across parcels 11 through 19. My lot was 13, hers was 9, meaning her property did not even touch the water, not by a single foot. I could feel my pulse quicken. Karen, The HOA vice president, who had threatened me with daily fines, had zero claim over the lake she said was hers. I printed every map, stamped and certified just in case. The next evening, I attended the HOA meeting. Karen sat at the front table beside the president, holding her pink folder like a weapon. When my turn came, she said in that perfectly fake, polite tone, "Mr. Cole, we have received multiple complaints about your dock encroaching on shared water property. Would you like to respond?" I smiled. "Actually, yes. I brought something you will want to see." I laid the deed and maps on the table, each one clearly showing the boundaries. The other board members leaned forward. Karen frowned but said nothing. I pointed to her lot number on the map and said, "Yours ends here, and mine extends into the reservoir, which means that dock you keep calling illegal is entirely on my land." The room went quiet. You could almost hear the air conditioning hum. Then Karen said through gritted teeth, "These records must be outdated. The HOA has jurisdiction over all shared amenities." Brad, the manager, stepped in. "Actually, Karen, I verified these with the county yesterday. He is correct." She froze, just for a second, then collected her papers and muttered, "We will review this further." But I could tell she was not done. The look she gave me as the meeting ended said it all. She was angry, embarrassed, and probably already plotting her next move. I walked out into the parking lot feeling relieved, but something in my gut told me the fight was far from over. People like Karen did not lose quietly. Sure enough, the very next morning I received an email blast from the HOA, sent to every homeowner in the community. Subject line, "Unauthorized dock violating community rules." The photo attached? My dock. And that was when I realized this was about to get a whole lot uglier than I thought. The moment I opened that email, I felt my stomach drop. There it was, my dock, plastered in the middle of a community-wide announcement labeled as an unauthorized structure in violation of HOA guidelines. The message was signed by none other than Karen L., Vice President, Willow Ridge Estates HOA. I just stared at the screen for a good minute, trying to process it. This was not a private warning. This was public humiliation. Every neighbor, every homeowner, every person on that mailing list had seen it. The message even included a line that said, "The homeowner has been repeatedly advised to remove the dock but continues to ignore official HOA instructions." That was a lie, and a dangerous one. Within an hour, I started getting texts from neighbors. "Hey man, what is going on with your dock? Karen's saying you are blocking the lake path? Do you need help fighting this?" That last message was from my neighbor, Jason, who lived 2 houses down. I replied, "Come by tonight. You will want to hear this." By the time he showed up, I had already printed the deed, the maps, and the county ownership records. I laid them all out again, this time with a pot of coffee between us. He leaned over the documents and whistled. "Dude, your lot literally owns part of the lake. She's way out of line." I nodded. She knows that. She just wants control. Jason chuckled. Classic Karen. But I was not laughing, because this time she had crossed a legal line, defamation, misrepresentation, and possibly harassment. The problem was, I did not want a lawsuit. I wanted peace. So I decided to give her one last chance to back down gracefully. The next morning, I went straight to the HOA office. Brad was at the front desk, looking visibly uncomfortable. When he saw me, he sighed. "I figured you would be coming in." "Brad," I said calmly, "you saw that email. You know it was false." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I did not approve it. She sent it directly to the mailing list." "Then you need to make it right," I told him. "Send a correction. Let people know the dock is fully legal." He hesitated. "I cannot do that without board approval. You know how she gets. But maybe come to the next meeting and make your case again." That was in 4 days. 4 long days of rumors, whispers, and neighbors pretending not to stare when I walked my dog past the lake. But the worst came on day 2. I returned home from work to find 2 orange warning stakes hammered into the ground beside my dock. Each had a laminated notice attached. "Pending removal. HOA enforcement action." I froze. She had actually marked my property for removal. That night I could barely sleep. My mind kept replaying the image of her smug face at that first meeting, the way she talked down to everyone, the way she needed to win. By morning I had made up my mind. If Karen wanted to make this a war, I would not fight it with anger. I would fight it with facts, law, and public truth. I called a local attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. His name was Mark Sullivan, a calm and no-nonsense guy who had clearly seen every power-hungry HOA officer in the book. I explained the situation, sent him the documents, and waited. When he called me back, his tone was almost amused. "Mr. Cole, you are in a very strong position. Your property boundaries are clear. If she or the HOA attempts to remove your dock, they will be liable for trespassing and damages. My advice, do not touch the dock. Let them make the next move. But attend that meeting. Record everything." That was exactly what I planned to do. 4 days later, I walked into the HOA meeting room with my phone recording in my pocket. The usual dozen residents were there, sitting in folding chairs, murmuring quietly. At the front, Karen was already standing beside a projector showing, you guessed it, a picture of my dock again. She began with her usual speech. "As most of you know, the HOA board has been dealing with a non-compliant homeowner refusing to remove an unauthorized structure." I raised my hand. "Excuse me, may I respond to that before you continue spreading false information?" Her eyes narrowed. "You will have your turn, Mr. Cole." "No," I said firmly, stepping forward. "You sent a public email accusing me of violating community rules. You posted removal notices on my property. You are aware that the dock is fully within my deeded boundary, yet you continued this campaign anyway." The room went silent. Karen gave a tight smile. "Mr. Cole, I have documentation from the county office stating that the reservoir belongs to the HOA. I reached into my folder, pulled out a certified copy of the ownership plat, and placed it on the table. You mean this documentation because this is from the same county office, dated last week. It states that parcels 11 through 19 include partial reservoir ownership. My lot is 13. Yours, however," I flipped to the next page and pointed, "is 9. You do not even touch the water line." A low murmur rippled through the audience. One man whispered, "Wait, so she does not even live on the lake?" Karen's smile faltered. "This is misleading. The HOA..." "Enough," I said, raising my voice just enough for everyone to hear. "You have slandered me, attempted to fine me, and publicly humiliated me in front of my neighbors, all based on false information. And now you are caught." For a moment, she just stood there, her composure cracking. Then she snapped, "Fine. If you want to play legal games, then so be it. The HOA will pursue this through counsel." I looked straight at her. "Good. My attorney will be waiting." I turned and walked out, leaving her fuming at the front of the room. That night, I forwarded the full recording of the meeting to Mark, my lawyer. He wrote back, "Keep the footage safe. If she follows through, we will counterclaim for harassment and defamation." But I did not have to wait long for her next move. 3 days later, I woke up to the sound of construction equipment outside. A truck from a local landscaping company was parked beside the lake. 2 workers were unloading tools and a small winch. I rushed outside. "What are you doing?" One of them said, "We have an order from the HOA to remove a dock violating community property lines." I could feel my blood pressure rise. "You touch that dock, and you are trespassing on private land. I suggest you call your supervisor." They froze. I pulled out my phone and started recording. A minute later, the crew foreman got off the phone and looked pale. "Sir, we are leaving. Sorry for the mix-up." They packed up and drove off. But the damage was already done, not to the dock, but to my patience. This was not about boundaries anymore. It was about power, pride, and someone who could not stand being proven wrong. I called my lawyer again. "Mark, I think it is time we go on offense." He agreed instantly. "Let us file a cease and desist, then prepare a formal complaint. If she keeps acting under the HOA name, we can bring the whole board into it." And as I hung up the phone, looking out across that calm blue reservoir, the one she claimed as hers, I realized something. Karen did not know it yet, but this little lake battle was about to make waves far bigger than she ever expected. After that morning's stunt, I knew one thing for sure. Karen was not going to stop until she either broke me or got embarrassed in front of the whole community, and honestly, I was fine with the second option. My lawyer, Mark, filed a cease and desist notice the very next day. It outlined everything: the false public email, the unauthorized notices, the attempted removal, and the public defamation of character. He sent it directly to Karen and copied the entire HOA board. By that afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was an email notification from the HOA group chat. The subject line read, "Emergency board session, property dispute escalation." I smiled. She was cornered, and she knew it. But I had no idea that what was about to unfold would expose far more than just a fake lake ownership's claim. The meeting was held 3 days later at the same community hall, except this time, nearly half the neighborhood showed up. Word had spread fast. Everyone had heard about the dock drama. Karen was already at the front, dressed in her signature pink suit, shuffling papers with a tight jaw. Brad, the HOA president, sat beside her, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. When it was my turn to speak, I walked up with my folder of documents. Again. Only this time, I also had a printed copy of the cease and desist letter and the county property maps blown up on poster boards. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began calmly, "over the past 2 weeks, the HOA vice president has repeatedly targeted my property, issuing false claims, unauthorized notices, and even attempting to remove my private dock. I would like to show everyone exactly why that is not just wrong, but illegal." I stepped aside and revealed the large property map. "This," I continued, tapping the blue-shaded section, "is my parcel, Lot 13. And this entire portion of the reservoir, about 0.8 acres of it, is privately deeded to me. It is not community property. It is not under HOA maintenance. It is mine." Gasps filled the room. "And this," I pointed toward the opposite end of the map, "is Lot 9, Karen's property. Notice anything? It does not even touch the water." The murmurs turned into whispers and stifled laughter. Even Brad lowered his eyes. Karen's voice cut through the noise. "This is outrageous. The HOA has always maintained that the reservoir is shared property. That has been tradition since the community was founded." I nodded. "Tradition is not law, Karen. You cannot just rewrite property lines because you feel entitled to them." That line hit harder than I expected. People actually clapped. Her face flushed red. "You are twisting things, Cole. You think you are the victim, but you built that dock without permission." "I built it with a permit," I interrupted, pulling another document from my folder. "Approved by the county's environmental planning office with a clear statement that no HOA approval was required because the land falls outside association jurisdiction. You signed a violation notice against me after that permit was issued. That is retaliation. Now, every neighborhood has one person who takes the HOA job way too seriously. Ours was Karen, the vice president of the HOA, a woman in her 50s with a pink suit for every meeting." Brad finally spoke up. His voice was shaky. "Karen, did you really not check the updated boundary maps before sending that email blast?" She froze. I was told the old bylaws still applied." "By who?" Brad asked. No answer. That silence said everything. The room buzzed with realization. She had acted entirely on her own. No authorization, no board vote, just ego. I leaned forward slightly, keeping my tone calm but firm. "You owe every homeowner in this room an apology, not just to me, but for abusing your position." Brad cleared his throat. "Mr. Cole, the board will review your documentation immediately. In the meantime, all HOA actions against your property are officially suspended." That was the moment I knew I had won the battle. But not the war. Because as I was leaving the hall that night, Jason caught up to me, holding his phone. "Dude, you need to see this," he whispered. He showed me a screenshot, a message from the HOA's internal group chat that someone had leaked. It was from Karen. "He will regret embarrassing me like that. If the HOA cannot handle him, I will make sure the county reevaluates his permits myself. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I could not believe how far she was willing to go. So, I forwarded the message to my lawyer. His reply was instant. Perfect. That is harassment. Let us file the claim. And we did. A few weeks later, I received the final notice from the county clerk. The court has ruled in favor of the homeowner. The HOA and its acting officer are hereby instructed to retract public statements and issue a formal apology. That single sentence felt better than any victory speech. A week after the ruling, I got an official letter from the HOA, signed by Brad, not Karen. It read, "On behalf of Willow Ridge Estates HOA, we apologize for the false claims and unauthorized actions taken by one of our officers. We appreciate your patience and cooperation." And just below that was a second letter, this one from Karen herself. Mr. Cole, I extend my apologies for the misunderstanding and any distress caused. Effective immediately, I am resigning from my position on the board. I stared at her signature for a long moment. Then I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and stepped outside. The lake was calm that evening, the water reflecting the soft orange of sunset. My dock stood there quietly, like it had never been the center of a neighborhood war. Jason came by carrying 2 beers. He handed me one. To surviving HOA madness. I smiled. To finally being left alone. He chuckled. You think she learned her lesson? I shrugged. Karen? Maybe. But if not... I looked out across the water, letting the reflection shimmer under the fading light. At least now she knows whose lake she is talking about. We both laughed, clinking bottles. The sound echoed softly over the water. If you have ever dealt with an HOA like that, one that forgot where their authority actually ends, you already know how it feels to stand your ground. Tell me in the comments, what is the craziest HOA rule or officer you have ever faced? Because these stories, they deserve to be heard.